So for this demonstration video, I'm going to talk with you more about surface decoration and working with underglazes. Specifically, this video is going to tackle two things. We're going to look at stenciling. How do we layer underglazes with simple stencil shapes? And then I'm going to show you how to do inlay. I have a couple examples of some finished products here. Both of these pieces contain both processes. So we have examples of stenciling, which is how these larger shapes of clouds and flowers got there. And then we have the inlay, which is all of the black line. So I'm going to show you both of those processes. And for that, I'm going to be working with this slightly altered throne form, bowl, vase, whatever you want to call it. And it is in leather hard state, so that's very important. A nice medium leather hard, not too soft, not too late leather hard. And what I did is I took a pink underglaze and I brushed the whole thing first. So I'm considering that layer number one. The next thing I have are some stencils. And I like to use newsprint paper because they're very soft and flexible. Because we're putting paper on a 3D surface, it has to be able to be very flexible. I'm going to do two more layers. So I have two different types of shapes. This kind of cloud-like shape again, which I use quite often, will be for one layer. And then I have these almost petal or shield type shapes for another layer. Okay? So starting with my next layer, I'm going to take some of this newsprint, and my first layer of underglaze is dry. And to help this newsprint stick to your leather hard piece, I like to squirt a little water on it. Ultimately though, it's not going to stick great. You're going to have to use your hands to hold it in place. And so you put your stencil down, have your next color ready to go, and you just start brushing. Okay. Of course, I'm brushing away from the edges, which is going to give my stencil a little bit more crispness. But I also like my layers to look kind of rough and weathered and imperfect, if you will. That's kind of the look that I like. So this part of holding the stencil perfectly in place is not that important to me. Once I've covered it, then I just remove that stencil, and it's given me a nice shape. And then if I have more stencils, I just continue on. Okay, put a little bit of water on there, help it stick. Okay. Place it, still hold it, and start to brush. Okay, so I finished my first layer of stencils, and I got them placed on there and put the green underglaze on top of the pink. So now I have just these pink cloud-like shapes that are showing up, and I'm now going to use some more stencils to put another layer on. So again, I take this newsprint stencil, I wet, dampen one side of it, and then I place it on my piece that, remember, is nice leather hard. Knowing I have to hold it on there. For this layer, I'm using a gray underglaze. And again, I'm going to brush away from the edge, okay, which will help me get a crisper edge. peel that off. And so now I've got, 3 different colors happening. Do my next one. Once you've used one of these newsprint stencils, it's really not usable again, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay, place it and brush away from the edge. Okay, so I'm going to get this layer finished, and then when we come back we'll talk about inlay. Glaze on here. I did some stencil work. Now I want to do the inlay process. And inlay is exactly how it sounds. You're going to be laying in some sort of underglaze color to make line work now. In our studio there is a bucket that's labeled inlay. It also has a laminated sheet of directions in case you forget, with some examples. But you can see this is how to get nice detailed line work in your pottery. Inside the bucket you will see brushes that are in here, different types of carving tools like X-Acto knives and needle tools. You will see some black underglaze and this purple container that is actually wax that's made for ceramics. So the first step for inlay is to pour a little bit of wax into your palette and use one of these brushes, whichever size you prefer. And you're going to brush the wax onto this leather hard pottery, but remember those underglazes have to be dry. So they're not wet anymore. So now I can put my wax on. You decide where you want to put it. If you're only going to do a very small line design right here, then you only kind of need to brush some wax in that area. But if you're going to be doing line designs over the whole thing, you're going to want to coat the entire thing with wax. But here's what's very important to remember. The wax and the inlay has to be the last step. The wax, once you put it on, it does not come off. And the only way to get it off is to put it in the kiln and burn it off. So my point is, if you put some wax on this right now and you think, oh, I want to add another layer of underglaze, it's too late, because the wax will resist everything you put on it. So this has to be the last step. Okay, so it goes on this nice lavender, and you just brush it on. Since I'm going to be doing line designs, kind of over the whole thing, I am just coating the entire thing with one layer of wax. As it dries, it lightens, it almost becomes completely transparent with just a hint of lavender. That's kind of how you know it's dry. Plus you can also see that it's not as shiny anymore, and then you can feel if it's dry. So just a reminder, there's no going back. Once you have wax on it, you really can't add anything else. Okay. So after you brush this layer on, you do have to let this dry. It doesn't take long. I usually put mine in front of the fan for about 3 minutes or so, and then it's ready. Line work's going to happen with sharp tools. The X-Acto knife is going to give you the smallest, thinnest, tightest line, and I'm going to start with that. And all I do is I just kind of carve. I just press into this leather hard clay. I'm going, right through the wax. Of course, I'm being careful, not to press too deep. and not to pierce through anything. And I'm just kind of drawing with my knife. Sometimes it can be difficult to navigate curves with an X-Acto knife, so you want to be aware of that. And really, you can use any tool that works for you. It may change the depth of your line, but just like a drawing, line variety is really nice. So keep that in mind when you're designing it. And then I'm going to switch my tool because now I want a thicker line. And also I'm kind of doing some curvier lines. Now when you have a thicker line, you are going to want to make sure that you kind of don't have crumbs that are filling up that area, so I do kind of go back a second time and scratch out any crumbs that might be stuck in there. And then I'll do the other side. All right. Next, once you've done all your carving, all your line designs, then you're going to use underglaze to brush over it, which I'll show you in a moment. It's so common to use black for inlay design. It just gives you that nice kind of black line. But I do want you to know that you can use any color to inlay. I'm going to demo with black, but I could use white, I could use pink, I could use absolutely any color. So you're not restricted. It's personal preference. Okay, so it's carved. Now I'm going to take this black underglaze and a slightly smaller brush. And I'm going to just brush over all of my line designs. Now, it probably looks like I'm covering everything and about to ruin what I've got going on here, but the wax is going to resist all of this black. And it will remain in the cracks. And I'll be able to wipe away from everywhere else. Now I am being careful to push the underglaze in there. I do want it to fill the cracks and settle deep inside of there. Okay. Once you feel like you've covered everything and you feel like it's filled, I usually give it just a minute to set up, okay? And then once it has set up, you're going to take one of these sponges and you're going to just start gently, don't press too hard, but gently wiping away. Make sure you rinse it. So I have a bucket of water here. Okay, so you see the process here. You see me wiping away and how it's not sticking because the wax is resisting everything. Okay, and if you continue that, then what winds up happening is you get your black marks. And then when we fire it and put it in the kiln, all the wax will disappear and you'll be left with your underglaze colors and all of these beautiful black lines, and then you can finish it, you know, up to you. It could be done once you take it out of the kiln. A lot of people like to put a clear glaze over it, or you can also use a colored mid-fire, maybe like a celadon or something transparent. Lots of options, but gives you really great results.